Mustafa, I think we can get started. We are 94 people connected right now. So
great. Let's start. Yes, that's a good audience. My name is Mustafa Ben Mamar. I am the program manager of the Africa Transport Policy Program. I have the honor to chair this webinar today. For those of you who speak just one language, English or French, there is a way. This webinar there are some interpretation services in French and in English, and you can always click on at the bottom of the screen on the interpretation button. Pour ceux d'entre vous qui ne parlent pas anglais, ce webinaire, on a un service d'interprétariat en français et en anglais, juste pour s'assurer que tout le monde est avec nous. Hein. Donc, ce webinaire, for those of you who don't know SSATP, it has launched its fourth development plan a couple of years ago. The development plan comprised three main pillars: the urban mobility, road safety, and regional integration, and leveraging digital solutions to enhance performance along regional transport corridors is a key focus of our strategy at SSATP. To this end, we have recently completed two studies under the regional integration pillar. A study on corridor performance monitoring systems, which we'll be presenting hopefully in a few weeks' time. And this study we're going to present today is a study on the situation of digitalization and policy environment in the African ports. The report offers a good overview of the current state of digitalization in African ports, looking at factors that drive port digitalization, such as access to reliable internet and the availability and reliability of data centers. Additionally, the report identifies significant barriers, including insufficient policies and regulations, which impede the digitalization process. The report also presents a set of recommendations aiming at supporting African ports in achieving a higher level of digitalization. Today we have Mark Wooten, who is the main author of the report, that will present this overview. In addition to this overview, we have also invited the ports of Banjul and Djibouti to share with us their experiences. At the moment, we have only the port of Banjul that is with us, but hopefully the port of Djibouti will join us as we speak. Last but not least, we have also, we are delighted to have two representatives of the Port Association, one in the East and one in the West Africa. We invite them as discussants to share their perspective as a discussant. Again, at the moment, we have only Mubarak, who is the representative of the Association of Ports in the eastern part of Africa, and hopefully Jean-Marie Kofi will join us later on. So with this short introduction, I would like to pass over the microphone to Kauri, our External Affairs Officer, to introduce the speakers. Over to you, Kauri.
hello. Let me just pull up really quickly the presentation slides. So I would first like to call to the stage, if you will, Mr. Mark Wooten, Associate Director of Port Planning and Smart Ports. Mark has over 25 years of experience within the shipping and ports industry. His background has been primarily in roles responsible for delivery of systems, technology solutions, and optimization to support and improve operations and supply chains in and around the ports. He will be presenting the port digitalization study that I've shared in the chat box with everyone here today. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Kaori. Hopefully you can see and hear me as well. Let me just start sharing the screen. Second. So as Mustafa and sort of Kaori introduced already, Royal Haskoning was appointed by the project sponsors, which I will cover in a minute, to do a study of the current state of digitalization in a number of African ports. And besides looking at the current systems and infrastructure and internal capabilities, we also looked at the enabling environment within those different countries, whether that be infrastructure or policies and regulations. So let me go to the next slide. Sorry, I have to also keep time. So as I said, the main sponsor was the World Bank Group, but we were also working together with the IAPH, the SSATP, which Mustafa is representing today, and the African Union Commission. So those were the main parties that funded the study. And we also worked with a partner DBA group who helped us with some components of it. We did, and I must also thank, have a number of partners in different countries that we used to, where we could do face-to-face interviews with the different respondents from the associations and port authorities. So just a quick overview of sort of run through of what's in the presentation today. You will have got a copy of it or through the share that Kaori has provided. This is also a summary of a much longer report that will come out from the World Bank, which has got a lot more detail and supporting appendices that cover the different topics that we investigated. So just a quick introduction to the study, what the scope was, the approach and methodology. We did 2 surveys. One was a general survey of as many people as we could capture in that work or are associated with the port environment. And then we did a much more detailed, as I said, where we could face-to-face intervention with port authorities to look at the state of digitalization within their ports and their particular environments. And then we also looked at the environment within the country, the policies and regulations that applied and relate to digitalization specifically. Those we combined into what we call the national fact file. So for each country that we covered, we have a short sort of summary of the key facts and sort of outcomes of the study. And then, as Mustafa mentioned already, we did, as far as possible, try to draw out some conclusions and recommendations, which were not so easy to do because, of course, each country has its own unique situation and challenges. So to really progress and advance, you need to have a, let's say, country or port specific action plan. But where we could, we tried to generalize and provide sort of recommendations that could be applied across all the countries that we had a look at. So this was what our scope included. It was a total of 39 ports in 31 countries. So we had several countries where we looked at more than one port. As I said, these were the ones where we, as far as possible, did face-to-face or online interviews with primarily the IT responsible or equivalent within the port authority, and often with their team or with colleagues that were involved in this topic of digitalization, cybersecurity, and general IT matters. As I mentioned, we did a desktop study of the legal policy and regulatory environment within the countries, specifically looking at regulations related to digitalization and related to port specifically where they existed. We also tried to structure our sort of questionnaire and sort of more detailed studies on a number of topics. One was around well, at that time it was still to be implemented or come into force, the new FAL Convention regarding maritime single windows. So we looked at the status and readiness for compliance with that. We also looked at, and obviously, and probably at the time when we started, there was still some lingering effects of COVID. So we looked at digital health and what solutions or technology was used around that. Port call management and generally at port management, terminal operations. We looked at the port community overall and what sort of platforms or systems there were in place within the different environments. Through the interviews that we did, we also looked at the level of digitalization of other government agencies and particularly customs and how that interfaced with the port systems and the other trading partners that were going through the ports. And quite importantly, we also obviously looked at the, let's say, existing cybersecurity prevention measures that were in place and what sort of policies and procedures were around and supporting those. So that was the overall scope. In terms of the approach, as I mentioned, we did a desk study that looked at the enabling environment, the sort of policies and regulations. We did a broad stakeholder survey, which we'll go into in a bit more detail in the next couple of slides, to look at their views on digitalization, the importance of it, the benefits of it, who should be in the lead, for example. And then we did the Port Authority surveys, which we'll cover again in further detail. And coming out of that were the fact files, which covered and summarized the outputs of the different elements that we did. So this was the first survey. As I said, we sent it to as many people as we could and tried to reach a fairly broad range of stakeholders. It was quite short and really just to test the waters or test the feelings around digitalization. So we had, I would say, a reasonable response that we would have liked more, but we had over 50 respondents. I think what we took away, and I would say it's better if you look through the details in sort of offline when you have some time. But what we took away from the survey was that everybody that responded felt that digitalization was a critical element to lead and improve supply chain performance and also transparency. So this was very strongly felt by everybody. There was also a view that there was a large dependency on the enabling infrastructure, not specifically within the port, but within the country more generally. A low aptitude for data sharing, and we also see this in I would say, generally in other ports in other countries as well. It's not specific to this study. We did also note, well, let's say the feeling from the respondents that there was a lack of policy direction or obligations for people to either invest or to participate in these digitalization initiatives, and that strongly that the government in these countries should really lead the digital transformation process and set the agenda for the ports and for the other related stakeholders. So these were the main takeaways from that study. We also had a bit of a, let's say, free text, so people could write some comments, which we also found useful to sort of get a little bit more than answering or rating different questions. So you can read these ones on the screen at the moment. We also did the same for the detailed study, so we could look at or create word clouds of commonly used phrases for particular topics and things like that. So I'd say overall it was quite positive, that people felt that digitalization was beneficial and that further efforts should be made, and that there needs to be still improvements and efforts made to push this forward within the African ports. This was the second survey with the port authorities. We'll go through the results reasonably quickly. There's more detail available when you want to have a look at it. Overall, we did see we sort of ranked it on a scale of, let's say, 0 to 5, where 0 is, let's say, what it is, nothing, and 5 is relatively quite advanced. What we did pick up is that it was very difficult to see any patterns in terms of the scoring. So it was not related to particular regions, to particular size of port, throughputs of ports, economic development in the country. Overall, we did see most ports had some form or relatively mature cargo operational solutions, systems in place, which makes sense. That's where the sort of initial investments would have been, and low level of maturity or scoring for customs and other state entities. We also noted low scores for things like cybersecurity, which we will come back to at a later point. So this is the same graph. You can just see the distribution across the different ports. Just to comment, as I said, this was based on interviews and a questionnaire that we went through with different respondents. So it was based on the responses from the individuals that were interviewed. It wasn't a sort of detailed audit and cross-check. There were different categories within the question. So it can be that some ports scored higher in some areas and lower in others. And we also have all of that detail. But if we look at the different categories that we had within the questionnaire, and within each of these, there were a number of sub-questions or sort of more detailed questions. We looked at the overall sort of technology in place or views on lead sort of new technology that's coming out, things like IoT, digital twins, 5G, these types of solutions, and what the port's attitude, whether they were implementing it, thinking about implementing it, interested in it. So this gave a view of their appetite for, let's say, these more leading edge solutions. We also looked at what currently systems were in place. So that was under port management systems, and you can see that scored relatively well. And then we stepped into, I would say, more detailed topics around data centers and business resilience, security, and then different areas of operations from marine, rail, cargo operations, security and compliance. And then the last topic was around what we call organizational readiness for digitalization. And this one also scored quite well across the board. So as I said, these were some of the word clouds that we picked from within the different sort of question categories. So you can see which systems people were running. So it was primarily like Navis, or their own sort of in-house systems were the main ones. We also checked about awareness for the cybersecurity guidelines that were issued by the IMO or IAPH, and which ports were aware of them or had implemented them. And that was also very low. So this is one of the topics we will come back to again. So you can see a little bit how these results looked on a sort of, this is just I would say a sample. What we also saw was that most organizations were more ambitious than what the current environment, let's say, showed when we looked at what systems there were, what they had in place, the organization, the employees we spoke to, the managers and representatives were much more, let's say, were keen to do more and had plans to do more than what was currently there. So that what we saw, the ambitions did not necessarily translate into the actual current situation, but should be an indicator of future improvements in digitalization. I already mentioned cybersecurity, and I think what was quite important for us and for some of the sponsors was also that the majority of ports that we spoke to at the time, this was, let's say, in the middle of 2023, were mostly aware but would not be ready for the say new regulations that came into effect in January this year around the transmission of port call information through maritime single windows. As I said, while several ports were working on it, it was the majority would not have started or had enough time to actually have developed those solutions by the time of the deadline at the beginning of this year. Then we did the policy review. So as I said, this was a desktop study looking at different legislation within the countries, and of course from country to country it's a whole, yeah, I will not say a minefield, but it's quite broad list of policies, regulations that need to be looked at to see to what extent those are related to ports or to digitalization, and whether they then are enabling or not, or maybe hindering the development of further digitalization within the port. What we saw were, I think, where there are policies, it does not also necessarily mean that those have been implemented, and that they could still be in the progress, but we didn't necessarily see a correlation directly between policies being in existence and the directly level of digital maturity within the country or within the ports in the country. And we saw that specifically around maritime and trade single windows. What we did see as a good indicator was the OECD trade facilitation indicator. And we saw a good correlation between that and the level of digital maturity within the country and the country's ports. What we heard from the port authorities that we spoke to was also that there was limited active support from their governments, specifically around port digitalization funding and initiatives. So this was another takeaway that we got from our interviews. So these were, I would say, just one of the outputs from the study, as I said, was the fact file for each country. And it sort of was a 3-pager which looked at general information about the country and the ports. We looked at some indicators that we got about, for example, network, cybersecurity, internet penetration that related to the country. So this gave a level of, let's say, infrastructure within the environment. Then we looked at the policies and regulations related to digitalization and to what extent those were positive or negative or in place. And then we had a sort of last page which related to the actual systems and the digital maturity that we got for each country. So this was a bit of a summary per country of all of the different components of the study. Then to get to the end, as I mentioned, we did look at or try to find what factors drove port digitalization. And in the most cases, we didn't find a direct correlation, for example, between the size of the port, the type of port, whether it was a, let's say, government operated port or whether it was privately operated through concessions. This didn't directly affect the level of digitalization or the volume and flow of cargo through the port. We did see a link to the IT infrastructure within the country and connectivity. And then we did see very much a high correlation to what we call government trade facilitation, which, as I mentioned, we found a sort of through the OECD Trade Facilitation Index. So again, this is just a way we showed it with strong connection between the two, and then weak connections for, as I said, the other factors like cargo throughput and size of port. Also because we are, I would say, technically minded and engineering sort of generally, we would like to develop a model. So we also try to, thanks, Kagori, create a predictive model that we could use also to, if we had other ports that we maybe did not study, or if things have changed within an environment, we could then look at how that would impact on the level of digitalization. So we created a sort of model that to create a formula for how you could predict the digitalization score. You do see some outliers, both above and below. So these ones, we haven't really seen why specifically they were so far away, but I think there's also reasons that talk to those particular ports and why they scored better or worse specifically. And then these are the results on a sort of port by port basis. So you can see that overall they're quite closely correlated between the, let's say, predicted and actual results. We did one quick look as well on the impact of digitalization on port performance, particularly looking at some of the studies that the World Bank had done, mainly related to container port performance. So it was not, let's say, overall port performance as such. But within that, we could not see a direct, let's say, link between the two. Overall, we saw that there was some association between the scores, but we also saw cases where ports had low digital maturity but higher performance, and vice versa. And we thought there are maybe more significant factors that relate to the level of performance, such as the equipment that is used, the labor environment, and those type of factors more directly, in fact, affect the performance of the port. Just two more slides, I think. One was sort of general awareness, general observations. Firstly, that there was a strong awareness around digitalization and ambitions towards it. As I said, most ports did have the essential foundational systems like terminal operating systems and custom systems in place. Resilience and cyber we saw was weak overall. The same with the support from government policy and investment in digitalization. And we also noted a limited, almost no appetite for automation, but that digitalization was also seen as a way to improve trade and port efficiency. This is the last slide. So these were as I said, what we tried to generalize, the recommendations. So raising awareness on the maritime single windows and the FEL requirements, increased investments in infrastructure within the countries generally, better alignment with governments around policies and investments for digitalizations, maybe specific focus on several ports where we saw particularly low scores on digital maturity, investment in digital skills within the port staff, particularly related to cyber and information security. And then we also saw opportunities to facilitate cooperation between ports, either on a regional or local basis, to help ports that have advanced, and think to some extent how we will do it with this webinar, that are more advanced, particularly to share their learnings with ports who still need to go through that transformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. So now we will turn over to the case studies. And I would like to invite Ousmane Jamet, Director of IT at Gambia Ports, to the stage. Mark Jamet is the Director of Information Technology at the Gambia Ports Authority and Chair of the Technical Implementation Committee for Port Digitalization. His role involves leading digital transformation efforts at the Port of Banjul and providing crucial support to government technology projects in the maritime sector. So Mark, Ousmane, if you could please share your presentation in presentation mode.
Thank you very much, Kiara. Let me do that a second.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Is it up?
Yes, it's on presentation mode.
All right,
Thank you.
okay. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So, okay, quickly, for those who don't know, the Gambia Ports Authority, which was actually established about couple of years from our independence in the Gambia, 1965. Now, currently the port, it still handles its terminal operation. It's a service port equally. And we handle things like cargo handling operations, terminal operations, and tugboat management, and also berthing and vessel management. So the importance of digitalization of ports for port operation, it is critical and pivotal that modern port operations have to be digitalized, noting that 80% of cargoes and goods are transported via the sea, with the supply chain becoming increasingly complex and the need of raw materials to create finished products. It's important that port computerization and digitalization is embedded within the end-to-end process of port operation for efficient marine and also trade logistics. In summary, it's essential that modern ports have to improve and enhance their digitalization. For the port of Banjul, noting this, so we have during the stage of our digitalization process, we face a couple of challenges, which are insufficient inefficiency in manual processes, lack of real-time information, challenges when it comes to revenue leakage, as there is most of these payments and certain transactions are mainly manually done. Then you have operational bottlenecks between the various departments within the operational within the port operations that also affect the cargo delivery and the cargo throughput. You also have delays in providing timely report for management to make timely decision in terms of operations within the port. And then interconnectivity issues, that is connecting within the various stakeholders like the shipping lines, the customs, and the port community in general. The other challenge is also have proper KPIs in place for monitoring and also at the same time for insightful reporting and also for quick turnaround decision making. And based on most during our digitalization, and which we are still actually working on, some of the risks actually we face is that these are the senior management support, and because it's crucial to note that any digitalization you need to embark on, you need the support of the senior management, from the managing director to the CEO down to the level of the last person in senior manager. You actually need the board support. In governance and policies too, the central government has to drive this through governance and policies, and the institution or the authority also needs to make sure that there's proper governance and policies in place just to be in line so that it can actually support the digitalization processes. Because when you don't have some of this governance and policy, you're bound to face risk as to what to do and how to implement some of these things. You have things like we have capacity and skills issues. Passive resistant, meaning people will say yes to it, but at the end of the day, project becomes the challenges. Then you have issues with lack of resources local, especially in African countries. Most of we need to go out to make sure we have some of these technologies that we need. Cybersecurity, which is actually a challenge that we face. So our digitalization initiative, the ones which start are most of the things, some of the things that we've implemented, like the cargo handling tracking systems, the electronic documentation management, the cybersecurity measures and training and capacity development, the Green Port Initiative. These are some of these things actually we are currently actually working to make. So those are actually things that we've implemented. Certain challenges are like the Smart Port Initiative. Those are invested on IoTs and things, the digital payment solution, data analysis, port community system, and remote monitoring. And based on what we've did is that we came up with a 4-year strategic plan and also a work plan to look at, so we separated in different areas in terms of business continuity, business service delivery, IT operations, our practice and shared resources, social media integration, and then business intelligence. Also, we look at cybersecurity and policy. So all of these things, we separate most of the things within these separate categories. So on an annual work plan, on an annual basis, we focus on infrastructure, cybersecurity, business systems, enhancement. Some of these things include system solutions like maybe the TOS and other operational IT systems, and also importantly, IT governance too. And also we have to also make sure that you make a focus on support and training, which is very critical. So as of now, the key components of our digitalization and that we've actually are able to focus on is our back office, the terminals, harbors, that is SIP to SOAR, the billing, etc. Also stakeholder integration, payment integration, also having sustainable technology in mind, just to make sure we're in line at least with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Cybersecurity, that is security and surveillance, that are CCTV. IT infrastructure, this includes the data centers and network infrastructures connecting your data center to your WAF and some of your operational equipment. So at the site of what we have digitalized at the Banjul port right now, it's the SOAR handling revenue collection system. We've digitalized that actually, and all of the system that I'm seeing right now, except the enterprise resource planning system, which is actually went live. We're using the Microsoft Dynamics Live to digitalize all of our operations at the back office. The rest of the solution you can see on the screen, like the cargo delivery, electronic DO, electronic gate passes, and electronic intelligence system. All of these things have been developed and built in-house. So, and the benefits that we gain from this were like improve efficiency and productivity on digitalized processes and enhance status and cargo tracking, improve turnaround time and cost and revenue saving. So some of the success stories that we were actually able to gain from this were like, once we launched the EDO, we've seen a significant improvement in the release process, about almost 80% increase, because during the time, manual DOs usually take between 10 to 30 minutes, depending on the number of cargoes, but now it's normally under a minute now for those document processing to generate your EDO. Authorization process is actually take less also. With the introduction of the EDO, this has significantly improved our cargo delivery time and also complying with some of our related issues. And areas where you use about 10 people, you will need 1 or 2 people, and some of them you can put them to handle some of the other tasks. So, and the lesson learned here is that it's important. Team management is very critical and important, because if you don't have the buy-in, not from the senior management, but from the people who will be using the system too, they can resist actually thinking that this might take their job, or also it won't work. So it's critical. You need to have that end user buy-in. So, and we also look at cloud and on-premise. This actually depends on the institution. I know the cloud is the buzzword, everybody's saying cloud computing, but actually, is your internet fast enough? Do you have the right infrastructures in place? So some of these things has to be considered. And also having the right project implementation team is very, very critical. Making sure your project charter is approved before moving forward, or else you might face certain issues, or you have certain end users, certain people within the project who are not being delivered as per the way you want. You also need to understand your IT competency level at your institution, because we all African we go for study tours and we go for technical visits. We can see like, okay, this system works perfectly, but what we need to consider is how does it work and what benefit does it provide for them? The once we come back, we assess those things. We don't need to invest on $1 million system to deliver actually what you need. Also, consideration is that in-house development or outsource some of these things. Some of the solutions are becoming very expensive. So we consider in-house development, and where we know that we need to get some of these solutions off the shelf, then we try to engage that. What our strategy more or less is looking into when we have this solution, we make sure we build our in-house team, noting that when it comes to revenue and also the capital to invest on this system, they are very, very expensive and maintaining them too. So the software vendor provide the hardware. This is also a very big consideration that you need to consider. Do you need to do it yourself, or should the provider provide some of this hardware, because they're critical, because they can actually set up your cost when it comes to managing some of these digitalization projects. So for our future direction for the next 3 years at the Banjul Port, we're looking at a fully functional port management system that by the end of this year, we'll have that fully done. So just a quick wrap up, because time is almost up. So these are some of these things, the terminal operating system, the vessel management, and also to establish also a committee for logistics at the national level, PCS and a marine single window gate automation. And yeah. So general recommendation is to set up a data collaboration committee, and also association like the PMWC to look at into having a mandate to make sure IT department within the different port authority are participating in some of the committee level for crucial port computerized and digitalization challenges. Finding computer and top management should be trained to understand some of these things, and South-South cooperation between the ports within Africa. And thank you very much. That's the last slides.
Thank you so much. Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Usman. Now I would like to invite to the stage Warsama Gire. He's the Managing Director of Djibouti Port Community Systems, the company operating the Port Community System and Maritime Single Window Platform in Djibouti. Before his appointment at DPCS, Warsama worked as the Director of Technology for Djibouti Ports and Free Zones Authority. Warsama, please, would you like to share your presentation or?
Yes. Okay,
Thank you so much.
Kaori, thank you for having us. I'm not able to share my screen. Apparently it seems to be disabled.
Let me give you, I'm gonna make you a host so you can share your screen now.
Okay.
Still not seeing it.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Please use presentation mode if possible.
What about now?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, I'm just going to get started. Thank you. Hello, everyone. So a little bit of Djibouti Port Community System. So Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority has set up a company called Djibouti Port Community System. The system has been, or the company has been set up to digitalize the different processes linked to importing and exporting through the ports, airports, rail, and road corridors. We have a product mandated by the government through a decree that aims to leverage technology to simplify, connect, and streamline all these processes. So it's mandatory for all import-export processes to be digitalized through this particular platform. So this is background information on how Djibouti operates in terms of how it is planning to develop its maritime and logistic services. So we have a group called Great Horn Investment Holding, owned by the government. And in this group, you have all the different ports, free zones, Air Djibouti, the national airline, you have the security company for the port, you have the Djibouti Port Community System, you have all the different companies linked to the logistics and maritime sector in Djibouti. So these companies, they have around 3 strategies. First one being to develop or to have or to increase the traffic of our ports in Djibouti. The second one being to provide better logistic services to our neighboring landlocked countries, whether Ethiopia or beyond Ethiopia, South Sudan. So currently our ports are handling 89% of Ethiopia's import and export, and we have also started handling a considerable amount of cargo for South Sudan as well. And the third strategy is to do with development of free zone operators or free zone companies that are linked to the ports in terms of infrastructure, where we are developing some policies to facilitate companies to set up shop in Djibouti and to import, transform, do some light transformation in our free zone and re-export through the ports. So this is the structure. And when it comes to Djibouti Port Community System, we are contributing to these 3 strategies by providing, for the first one, the Maritime Single Window Platform to provide facilitation for the documentation of incoming vessels. For the second one, the facilitation of the documentation, transit or import or export documentation by integrating customs and all the required government stakeholders into our platform, and to provide our customers or the importers, exporters, a single platform where they can not only provide the necessary information, but where also they can follow in full transparency all the different activities, operations, and documentation processes that are linked to their cargo as it is passing through Djibouti port and different, I would say, government agencies in terms of documentation. So these are the stakeholders that we have for the port community system. So we have customs, we have the port authority, we have port operators, rail operators, road operators. We have not yet started to integrate the air cargo operators, but we have integrated 100% of the sea ports and 100% the road corridor agency, and all the cargo passing through the rail and imported and exported through the rail is passing through the platform as well. For the currently, we are going to also include the air cargo operators, because Djibouti is trying to develop this what we call air sea cargo, where the containers will be coming through our ports. It will be repackaged and sent by air to different cities in Africa. So this project is currently working, the RC cargo. Djibouti, through a company called the FTZ in the free zone, is providing also 19 destinations, 19 cities in Africa, where the goods come in Djibouti, are being repackaged, and there is also an agreement between Air Djibouti and Ethiopia Airlines, where they transport by air this cargo to 19 different cities in Africa. So we also have, in terms of stakeholders, the ship handlers, freight forwarders, shipping agents, all the importers, exporters, and also the banks to facilitate the payments. This was our stakeholders and the scope of the platform as of last year. So since August 2023, the scope of DPCS has been basically broadened to include all the different regulatory processes of import and exports. So now we are talking about government agencies in charge of sanitary, phytosanitary certification, energy certification, all the different certification provided by different agencies in the government to certificate or to inspect the cargo coming or going from Djibouti. So we are talking practically now a single window integrated with a maritime single window and integrated with our port community system. So the evolution was not, we did not get there from day one. So we had to start with the maritime single window, collect all the different documentation from there, start working on the manifest, then moved on to port community system functionalities, including the billing, online billing for the ports, all the different services provided by the port to be requested online by the shipping agents, invoices to be provided online, payments to be done online, and also the platform is getting all the different information in terms of cargo handling. So we're talking about vessel arrival. Automatically, we're getting that information from the different systems, whether the BTOS, what they call it for the general cargo terminals, or from navies from when it comes to container terminal. So all this information are coming directly from the port systems as well on what is happening with the cargo at any given time. So vessel arrival, discharge of the cargo, time of discharge for every single container. We're talking about if there is any change in the position itself of this particular container. The customers, whenever they are getting the port gate pass, they're able to even verify the position of the container in the platform so that they can assess the best time to go and get it. For example, they have different schedule of the gate entry or the booking, what they call pre-gate booking. So if a customer checks the position of the container and it's in, let's say, a certain part of the yard, he will choose automatically the schedule where the gantries are working on that particular side of the yard so that they can quickly come and get their containers. So that is also very important. So these are also the main features of the what you call it, port community system / maritime single window. You have all the vessel management to do with vessel registration, all the certification of the vessel, whereas we used to have a lot of different databases held by the Port Authority, the terminal operators. Now we have a single database for that, where the shipping agents request or submits the registration for a particular vessel, is approved by Port Authority, and once approved by Port Authority, it remains there to be consulted by the different port terminal operators. And then you have arrival and departure management, the 7 file forms, the general declaration, the what you call it, crew FX, the dangerous cargo declaration. Those are also submitted through the platform online for approval by the Port Authority. You have the cargo management features that start with the submission of the manifest through DPCS, then the manifest submitted to custom systems. Once acknowledged by custom systems, it becomes visible for all concerned parties for this particular manifest, whether the shipping agents, the terminal operators, or the importers themselves, or any other notified party. You have custom integration. We have integrated custom systems at this point in time for all the manifest submission, amendments of the BL, and electronic delivery order submission. So all these different, what you call it, processes or transactions are submitted through the PCS and acknowledged by or approved by the custom system, and the all customers can view then the response from customers from the PCS platform itself. Then you have the gate appointment module that they can use for requesting an appointment to pick up the container where they can check the position of the container. They can decide based on the schedule the best time they can come and get it. You have transit corridor services as well, since most transactions or most traffic is going to our neighboring country, Ethiopia, or beyond Ethiopia. You have the permits, the corridor permit, that the transporters can select and issue online and pay the $20 fee for that. And this document printed from the PCS allows them to go through the corridor all the way to Ethiopia. And then, of course, you have.
I'm sorry, can you please start wrapping it up? We need to move on, maybe in a minute or two.
No problem. Then we can, and then you have the integrated online payments. Then we're going to, if we don't have a lot of time, jump a few slides so that I can show you the. So these are the tracking documents. That's some of the tracking documents that customers can get through the platform. You have the port clearance certificate. You have the corridor road pass. You have the electronic pre-gate. For different terminal operators. And as these different documents are getting scanned throughout the port community, the final customer gets details of the progress of the cargo in terms of documentation process and in terms of operations as well. So this is a typical gate out tracking for a GC to gate transactions. Particular customer can follow if the transporters are basically doing their job and transporting their cargo on time. It has all the details of the cargo itself, transit cargo category, the weight of the cargo, details of the cargo, everything. This is a gate transaction. And for the final importer exporter, or importer I would say in this case, they have a global view of all the different operations and documentation process that their cargo is going through live through the platform. So they can check the submission of documentation by the shipping agents, the time and the date, the exact time the container has been discharged into the yard, the electronic delivery order submission. So the responsibility shifts from the shipping agents to the freight forwarder. So we have realized that a lot of the delay comes from the private sector themselves, whether the transporter has too many orders or the freight forwarder is trying to jungle between the customers. So the final importer needs to have full transparency on what is happening on their cargo, as also their cargo is being handled by the private sector, not only the government side. So freight forwarders, whenever they finalize the payments, everything is here. The exact time they have finalized the payments so that the final customer can follow up with them. The transporter, the gating gate, at what time they have booked and what time they have transported the cargo outside the port. Everything is very important. As you know, in terms of logistics, time is key. And also this transparency enables customers that are not in Djibouti and using our transit services, or Djibouti ports as a transit country, Djibouti as a transit country, to have full transparency on what is happening with their cargo, and gives them also transparency for them to be able to push the private sector they have a contract with to have a better performance in terms of delivery of their cargo.
Sorry, can you please wrap up?
That's it.
Warsama?
That's it. So these are the advantages. A lot of time saved. So berth allocation time 72 hours to 1 hour. 1 hour response time regulation is enforced through the Djibouti Port Community System. E-port clearance was able to save 18 hours for the vessel to leave our ports. You have the forwarders port documentation process from 1 day to 45 minutes, and better visibility in terms of documentation process and also in terms of operations. These are the advantages that we got from the platform. So I think this is my last slide. So thank you for giving your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Warsama, for sharing Djibouti's experience with us. Now I'd like to call Mustafa, who will be moderating the panel discussion, as well as Mubarak Soda, the Project Development and ICT Officer of the Ports Management Association of East and Southern Africa. And unfortunately, Jean-Marie Kofi, the Secretary General of the Ports Management Association of West and Central Africa, could not join us today. Instead, Mr. Tanto Kwalar Roland, Project Manager, will be representing him instead. So over to you, Mustafa.
Thank you, Kauri. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Osama. Thank you, Wasama and Usman. I think the presentations are complementary. I'm glad we started with an overview. And then we had these two case studies, the Banjul and the Djibouti port. I would like to invite the discussants, the Port Association of West and East Africa. My first question, I will come with two questions in the first round, and then we can also turn to the audience if they have any other questions. And then I come back again with another two questions. My first question is you know, at the World Bank, we tend to come with these indicators to assess the performance. I think you are all familiar with the Logistic Performance Index. We have an index for doing business. It came without risks, you know, because usually there is a bit of subjectivity when we have to assess these scores of index. That comes to my question. I think the whole report that Mark did is based on this digital maturity score, which is based on a survey. It's a combination of three factors: current capability in terms of technology and systems development, the future plans for the digitalization development and the port has gone through or is planning to go through. And the final element is whether digitalization is really taken seriously within the whole organization structure of a port authority organizations. These are the elements that Mark, I think, used to come out with these scores. He came with a score, an average score of 2.76 out of 5 for the whole African ports. We surveyed 39 ports. My first question, let me turn first, before going to the discussant, to Djibouti and to Banjul. I know that Djibouti scored above average, around 3.5, and Banjul was below average, 2.4. I would like to ask Djibouti and Banjul whether they are really comfortable with this assessment first, before turning to the discussants. Banjul, Usman, over to you.
Hello, Mustafa. I think the assessment is actually fair enough, understanding the time it was actually produced, and also noting that based on Djibouti's presentation and all the integration that has happened, we've started recently for most of these things. So, yes.
Good. Djibouti, you cannot disagree, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the objective is not to get top marks. It's basically to get constructive criticism on what is happening, and hopefully tell us where we can improve. So in that sense, I think it's quite accurate, I would say.
Excellent. Let me turn now to the Port Association. Is it something that is appealing to you? I mean, I'm talking about this score, digital maturity score, because the idea is really, as Djibouti just said, is just to see where we stand. What are the weaknesses? What can be done to improve the situation? Is it something that we can standardize going forward and revisit, let's say, every 2 or 3 years? Do you see any areas for improvement when it comes to the approach we use to estimate these scores? I would like to hear from you. Let's start with the Port Association of East Africa. Mubarak, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, for that context and introduction. Thank you very much, colleagues, for inviting me here. Looking at your question, definitely what I heard from you is if the implementation of specifically the maritime single window be a critical step to introduce and improve the level of maritime digitalization. That's if I get your drift correctly. Well, I think it is an important factor. When vessels call at the maritime gateways, vital information must be exchanged. Obviously, it is key to note with various entities ashore. They can include not only the port authorities, the pilots, maritime administrations, and health authorities. They all require information about the vessel's cargoes, dangerous goods, crew members, passengers, and more information for safety and security, environmental protection imperatives. I think the COVID pandemic also underscored the need for timely and accurate exchange of information. Well, when you have such an environment and you're handling this information being passed from one entity to another and in a manual system, you're just creating a whole room for mistakes and errors, duplication. Digitalization is key for information sharing, especially when it's very sensitive and it's very crucial and very time sensitive. You will reduce a lot of errors and improve the quality of information being exchanged. And furthermore, the shift, I think, towards digitalization in maritime information, for example, goes beyond the efficiency considerations. It also encompasses safety and environmental protection as well as the accuracy.
Great. So you agree it's something that we can use to monitor progress as a tool, you know, these digital maturity score. It's something that can be rolled on and have these surveys undertaken, let's say, every 2 or 3 years, like we did for the logistic performance index. Do you see something in that way? You know?
Well, yes. In short, yes, it would be an excellent milestone to see what has been achieved globally, at least. I think you can point to the IAPH tracker, which was launched at the height of the pandemic. It was just a way for the association to be able to get a snapshot of how well digitally prepared the port authorities are in handling the pandemic. I think it comes to bear that the port workers were essential workers, and they needed the port authorities to be able to function 24 hours, 7 days a week without any interference. And I think remote working also came into play, where you needed to have senior port authority workers to make key decisions, and they could not perhaps move physically from where they're living to where they work. So I think that in a way, and having the maritime single window, having the authority to delegate some of those processes electronically really helped alleviate some of the problems or the challenges.
That's clear. Thanks, Mubarak. Let's turn to the Port Association of West Africa. Tanto, over to you. Just whether these digitalization maturity score could be rolled on in time to time just to measure progress. I would like just your opinion on that.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. I hope you can hear me. I hope
yes, we can hear you clear. Yeah.
Okay, actually in PIMOCA, the Port Management Association of West and Central Africa, we've had this discussion for some time now, and I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Jean-Marie Kofi. He was unavoidably absent. He should have been here, and he's very much concerned by this topic, because in 2021 already, we had a big meeting of all the managing directors, about 20 of them of the sub-region, coming to discuss digitalization. And with the European Union, we've had a project on it. The idea has been how to measure the level of digitalization of ports. We didn't have an approach to that. I personally worked with a student here in Nigeria, a PhD student in maritime studies, and that was also a problem he was raising. So when I got your document, I read it, it looked like something we really want to go towards, because I want to know where each port is, what kind of effort they need to put to go where they intend to reach, because it's not a question that any port wants to digitalize themselves. The issue is how much they're ready to put into it to get where they want to go. In the year 2018, we started hearing a lot of single windows in our milieu here, port community systems, national single windows. Then we launched the IPCOA project. But during that project, particularly, I'm talking because the Gambian port is here. I went to Gambia. We kind of had an issue. I hope that the issue is being solved now. They had a power issue, electric power supply. So those were basic prerequisites to things like stable internet. If your grid, your national grid is on and off, it will affect internet and it will affect communication through that media. But Gambia had a lot of effort in trying to institute the port community system. I don't know if it's being deployed now in Gambia, but I know there was a project right there. The technical committee meetings of 2023 also underlined one important aspect with concessions. You know, port concessions in most of our milieus have been done in a declarative way. That means the concessionee would come and say, this is the traffic I have in my own terminal, and then the port authority would take it. But when we walked, we saw what was happening in the port of Kribi. The port authority of Kribi, they had a way to interface directly their system with the concessionee system, the terminal operating system of the concessionee. And it made in such a way that they have information on the cargo traffic, and they could manage their income better than other ports. That was something to take home that digitalization could help us solve, fight against information gaps that we would have with respect to the concessionees.
Great, thank you so much.
It's something we want to do every day. Want to do every time, every once in 2 years, 3 years, to measure these levels of digitalization and track our progress.
That's great. While we having this discussion, we had a question from Nana and Kruma that may be relevant to the port associations. She's saying that there is, given the shortage of financing and funding and the capacity at some ports in Africa, could we come with an integrated digitalization system to tap into the scale, you know, the economies of scale? Is it something that is envisaged by both port association in West and East Africa? Is it something that is on under your plan? I'm asking the port association. If you can start with Mubarak, for instance.
Right. Thanks, Mustafa. I actually saw that question in the chat box, and I even put in a written response to that one. Thanks for that question. I think it's very important. From a port association point of view, it is quite critical just to save the resources and the time. We even had collaborated with the Indian Ocean Commission to be able to see what is the feasibility of having a regional maritime single window system in place. Well, it was a very noble idea, and we all had all the stakeholders on board. However, one of the challenges that came to the fore was that there is the lack of a regional supporting framework to ensure that the data is captured and disseminated, or such a system can be put in place. Simply put, there was very little political will to see the project move from an inception to actualization. I think the aspect of the sensitivity of data information sharing and the aspects of cybersecurity were not in place at that moment. So it was simply a case of that we are not yet ready to have something on a regional scale at this moment without the supporting regulatory legal frameworks in place.
Great, thank you, Mubarak. Anything from the Port Association of West Africa on that point about this integrated system, just to seek some economies of scale?
No, absolutely. It's a topic in our technical committee meetings, particularly the Legal Affairs and Administrative Affairs Committee have talked on it, and then we're thinking of how to enhance and the emergence of smart ports in our region in the long run. So it's a whole program we want to put in place, but it's still at the inception level. We're still thinking about it. That's
great. There is another question that came through the chat as well, that's addressed to Banjul and Djibouti presenters. It says, if we had to put a ballpark figures, how much did it cost to put the digitalization of the ports, and how did it take? How long did it take to complete this? Just a ballpark figure on the costs that you incurred to get at this level of digitalization. Djibouti. Hello? Have we lost Djibouti port? Let's start with Banjul then, hopefully. Usman?
Yes, hello, Mustafa. So actually, I did respond in the chat, but to get a ballpark figure will actually a bit difficult, because considering some of our solutions we implemented in-house, and some of them too, it depends on your port needs and specific requirement. So, and for us, we started this digitalization journey 2-3 years back, and we're hoping that based on our future direction and next step within the next 3 years, the essential solutions such as the TOS, the PMIS, and the maritime single window will be done by then. So now let's say somewhere around 6 years, but noting that the marine sector evolve quickly, so you need to put into consideration of thinking of smart port and some of those things after having the essential solution, and look at, is it actually a requirement, or do your port actually need some of these things at the time?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Is Wasama back with us? Wasama, can you hear us? No. Never mind. Let me put another question to the discussant then. Maritime single window as a vehicle for port digitalization. I think the study that Mark did, one of the findings is quite striking. 28% of all ports in the study, which is 39 ports, already have a maritime single window, with another 15% actively implementing a single window. 26% of the port indicate that they have concrete plans to implement one within the next 3 years. However, the remaining 31% of ports have no concrete plans or not even interested in implementing a maritime single window. Could a maritime single window be a critical step to introducing and improving the level of maritime digitalization? That's the question that I'm asking myself, and I would like some help from the discussions. Why are some ports reluctant to have a maritime single window? And what is the role of the Port Association to promote this, the establishment of single window? So let's start with Mubarak. Mubarak, over to you.
Thank you again, Mustafa. Some of the challenges are quite surprising, according to studies carried out by the IAPH and other partners that we have worked with, the Indian Ocean Commission. I think the resources and the available technologies that the ports have do not prioritize on that list. The top reasons cited, according to those researchers, include there is some sort of resistance from the existing government agencies who may see the use of a single window as a threat to their control or their authority. So there is some resistance to change from the status quo, right? And I think I stated it previously when we're having the discussions for the establishment of a regional maritime single window. There's evidently a lack of trust from and between the entities inside that regional grouping, the nation states, the governments, as well as the private entities who may feel that sharing of sensitive data could damage their competitive edge. Okay, these findings could then suggest that a statutory reform could be a critical role in enhancing support for the implementation of digital initiatives such as single window systems, by making it very clear which government agencies are involved in the processes and what exactly their role and data sharing obligation should be. These should also be coupled with policies that make it clear to private stakeholders how commercially sensitive data will be shared and protected, as well as one or other finding was that there is simply a lack of skilled professionals and workers at the port authority level to drive digitalization.
Thank you, Mubarak. The West Africa Port Association, anything on that? Can you add anything on that?
Yes, I would like to add to what Mubarak was saying about the government, particularly the customs. In most countries that we've worked with, we realize that the customs are a bit reluctant to work hand in hand with the port authorities. It's as two administration. We've discovered in most of the countries, the customs have the Sidonia and their system. They want to work independently, and they say the port community system or the single windows from the port side would be is not easily accepted in their own systems. And there is this kind of a challenge about the jurisdiction. Where does my right end and where does mine start? So we have those challenges in implementing it, but definitely in most of the countries, everybody is for digitalization and for having a single portal, a digital portal for the sharing of documents to facilitate trade.
Thank you. That's very clear. We would like to open it for questions. I know that our colleague Baher would like to ask questions, but before passing the microphone to Baher, there was a question for clarification. I think it's addressed to Mark by Peter Stumheit. He's asking who answered the questionnaires. Is it the port authorities or the landlord container terminal operators? Mark, if you quickly just clarify this.
Sure. Okay. The main questionnaires were done by the port authorities, so that was the detailed one, and then we did the general stakeholder survey, which was open to as many people as we could fill it in. So it was, I'd say, primarily the port authorities, and then the broader survey with everybody.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Baher, do you have a questions, Baher?
It was just a comment on the point, the question that you had posed about having an index to show the maturity of digitalization in ports. And I think that would be actually very useful because again, this is a broad concept and it has many implications, not just for what we're talking about today, but even when it comes sometimes to measuring the main metrics of a port efficiency, there are issues there as well. So I think having something that shows everyone where you stand compared to other ports in terms of digitalization and the maturity of it would be something that would be very welcome. It's not going to be easy, obviously, but even if it's, you know, not that rigorous, it still offers the opportunity to examine where things are lacking. Another, you know, just a couple of quick comments. I tend to, when we talk about something being part of WTO, a requirement, or, you know, IMO, a lot of times these regulations are there, but they're not followed. So I think we need to also be looking at it in terms of what actually is being implemented on the ground, as that happens a lot. And definitely the last question that there was clarification on, getting the point of view of the operators, I would say is more valuable than, you know, well, as valuable as the port authorities, but it provides a different perspective as well, as they are the users, and we value the point of view of the users. Thank you, Mustafa.
Thank you, Bahir. I think on the first one, I think as far as the SSATP is concerned, I think we are ready to take on these surveys, let's say in a couple of years, just to see where we stand, whether we made progress. This is something that we have in our plan, but we would like these to be taken systematically. And we are talking now with a new body that is formed recently, which is the Green Ports Forum, that is established with the help of AUC, and whether they are ready to take on these surveys on a regular basis, so they can monitor progress as well. So I think, Bahir, you mentioned the regulations, whether they exist and whether they are implemented, and that's basically my next question to the discussants, because one of the main findings of the study is a lack of policy direction or obligatory regulations to invest further in digitalization. This indicates that there is still a large barrier to improving the level of digitalization. The prevailing consensus is that government need to lead the digital transformation process. So my question is would you, I mean, this is to Mubarak and to the West Africa Port Association, would you agree with this study finding and recommendation? What could the Port Association, both in East and West Africa, do to rally governments and port authorities towards a more having more conducive regulatory environment to improve in digitalization? I know this is not an easy question, but I would turn to you, Mubarak and Tato. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Again, like I pointed out previously in my answers, one of the challenges for the implementation is vision articulation and political lack of government and high-level strategic decision makers, because this is quite a strategic decision. I mean, to develop the maritime single window or any digitalization at the maritime gateways or any of the nodes in the transport maritime sector value chain. If our thinking as the Port Association would be that if such a project is steered under the leadership of the head of state, okay, just speaking out openly here, adherence, you would get the adherence of public administrative bodies will be ultimately guaranteed. Okay, I'd just like to point out also, just to clear the area, some of the recent studies that we have conducted with our partners, it has become apparent that some countries are way ahead of the curve. Like when it comes to Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Mauritius, and Mozambique have scored very highly in this section, having reported good political support from the highest level of office, that is either the presidential or prime ministerial level. And on the other hand, other countries such as Seychelles, Reunion, and Madagascar scored below the recommended level of government support. This is as per the findings from the survey carried out in collaboration with the Indian Ocean Commission.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. So when you talk about what the port associations can do to rally the members or the governments, as far as the PAMESA is concerned, we have facilitated various dialogues with partners outside of Africa, such as the European Seaports Organization, where the digitally served Portopia platform is used as a means of capturing and disseminating the PPIs there could be some very vital lessons to take away from the implementation of such a system. Work is also underway between PAMESA, the AFDB, the African Union Commission, to contextualize these applications on the continents with the support from the port authorities as well. And also, we also facilitate technical dialogues between the African ports, because we find some countries are ahead in terms of digitalization, to facilitate the exchange of best practices in mainstreaming digitalization. That is the perspective from PAMESA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mubarak. Tanton, over to you.
I totally agree with what Mubarak is saying, and I would have loved maybe to ask Mark, among the studies that was done, the 39 countries, whether there was an on-site visit, a visit to the port, or it was the respondents were online. This is because it would serve to know the degree of confidence of the data that was collected, and to know the error margin inside. I was struck when it was presented that the impact of digitalization on port performance was not established. So I began to kind of have a thought about the data itself, or the way the data is calculated. At the level of the Port Management Association of Western Central Africa, I know we have had contact with government. For example, when we had the council here in Nigeria on AFTA, the African Free Zone, we discussed with the ministry here, and they said we'll work together in order to facilitate trade through the role of port in implementing the African Free Trade Zone, which is a very important tool for trade in Africa if it is successfully implemented. So government incentive is important. Government presence, government authority is important in the process. We are mostly government-owned ports, so government is important in what we do.
That's great.
That's
Thank
what I
you
would
so
say
much.
for now.
Thank you, Tanton. Yeah. On the impact of digitalization on port performance, I think that was not the main scope of the study, but I am glad if you followed the presentation of the case studies of Banjul and Djibouti. There are really some concrete results and benefits in terms of transparency, in terms of avoiding some revenue linkages, increasing productivity. So that was not really the main focus of the study, but I'm glad that we had a chance to present these through the case studies that we shared with you today. Let me come with the last questions to the discussant. You know, the report came with a few recommendations. They are pretty broad. Again, I think the recommendations and the next steps that Banjul and the port of Djibouti shared with us are maybe more concrete if we have to discuss digitalization per se. But the recommendations that came through the report are pretty broad. I say focus on ports with low digital maturity, raise awareness on maritime single window requirements, build capacity in terms of digital skills, increase the investment in ICT infrastructure, and facilitate regional port cooperation. So my question to both of you, Tanto and Mubarak, do these recommendations resonate well with you? Are there any additional recommendations you would like to make to enhance the level of digitalization in the ports, in the African ports? So over to you, Tanto and Mubarak, on these recommendations.
Tanto, would you like to go?
Okay, Mubarak, thank you. I think the recommendations were really pertinent. If I would add it is to also say we need a kind of inside study also from inside, because that's the way we rally people, we rally our intelligentsia, the universities, the researchers at the level of our sub-region into the whole thing, so that communication is also done and the things are understood from within perspective, added to what is done with the World Bank. I think that would be an added value to the whole discussion. Thank you.
Let me just get this clear, Mubarak. Your suggestion is to do more specific studies when you say inside studies. So on specific ports, is that your suggestion?
No, my suggestion is that we need to more and more integrate our local experts into carrying out such kinds of studies together with the World Bank. You see, we need to have some initiative from for those type of studies from our regions, added to what is done from the external side, so that we have a complete view and we move towards a more convergent conclusions.
Right. Thank you for clarifying this. So, Tanton, over to you. On the recommendation, whether you have any additional comments on that. Tanton, have we lost him?
No, I was the one speaking.
Oh, sorry. It's Mubarak, so I got confused. Okay. Mubarak, over to you.
Thanks. I think I just resonate with what Tanto, my colleague from Western Central Africa, has stated here. The efficiencies of the gateways will need to be tackled collectively. Like I said, training institutions, academia, the intelligence, they all have to be involved. From the Port Association's point of view, it is also critical to look at other existing initiatives, whether in Far East or in Europe or North America and South America, what has worked and what has not worked, and what are the expectations in Africa based on the existing platforms. Okay, you cannot be able to meet all the expectations from just any platform. There will be other disruptions in the future. I think the impact of COVID-19 on global supply chains has spurred on national regional discussions and initiatives to accelerate digitalization in the supply chain. This momentum should be sustained so that similar disruptions do not cause deep and adverse impacts. I think the port associations are very willing to work with development agencies such as SSATP and the World Bank to see this kind of things implemented. Another thing, additional recommendation, in addition to what you have stated, it's critical to develop recruitment and retention strategies for technological expertise and talent. This is what the port associations have been calling for, the soft infrastructure. Whenever we're looking at capacity development, we're not looking at the people working in the ports. We're always looking at what hard infrastructure we have, what road we can expand, what berthing we can expand, or what kind of dredging we can do. However, we fail to consider that the human resource capacity at the port also plays a major role in the port competitiveness. In addition to that,
thank you so much.
There is ongoing, I think, on the global stage, the issue of big data, digitalization, utilization of tried and tested technologies are more important now than ever as the maritime industry slowly recovers from the pandemic. There is all indication that more than a third of the maritime and shipping organizations will be seeing their data volumes increase by more than 50% per year. Additionally, it is the depth and the variety of data which is increasing. And to handle and secure this deluge of information, which will be passing through the various agencies in the supply chain, it will be critical, in addition, to look at the adequate cybersecurity measures to be put in place with supporting legal regulatory frameworks. Thank you, Mustafa.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mubarak. I think we come into the end of this webinar. I think we went over the time allocated to us. Plus, we have the interpreters' time as well. So let's wrap up. I hope this webinar was useful, and I would like to thank Mark for giving us this most useful overview about the digitalization port in Africa. Usman and Wasama for providing us some insights on their case studies for Djibouti and Banjul. I would like also to thank the discussants, Tanto and Mubarak, for sharing the Ports Association perspective on digitalization. As indicated in the webinar announcement, digitalization of the maritime sector is an imperative and a strategic necessity to enhance operational efficiency, facilitate seamless trade, ensure the sustainability of the maritime sector, leveraging digital solution to enhance transport corridor efficiencies is at the center of SSATP Port Development Plan. This is just the beginning. I hope this first report will contribute to that. I would like also to attract your attention beyond the main report. There are two links that are provided. One of them is the fact files that brings together several elements of the African port digitalization study into a segmented and standardized and easy shareable format at a country level. It's something that can be useful to monitor digitalization at country level. And the other one is a link to maritime sector digitalization policy matrix. It presents the relevant policies, legislation, regulations related to digitalization in the maritime sector. So I invite you to consult these reports and these links through the SSATP website. And again, thank you so much for all the presenters, the discussants, and the participants and the questions we had so far. Thank you so much.